I've been wanting to do a video about friendship for some time, but I think I was really struggling with how to frame it and how to talk about this. But some things have happened in my life actually quite recently on the friendship front that were really making me think and mull this over some more. And so I thought maybe the thing to talk about is just that friendship in your 30s or friendship just in adulthood can be really hard. It can be really tough, and I want this to be a video where I'm just almost like chatting with a friend. So forgive me in advance if this gets a little bit rambly, but I would rather it just be very minimally edited and more uncut and have this just be a more organic conversation. And there's a few different things I want to talk about, but the main things are going to be kind of like how there are seasons to friendship, and by that, I mean, seasons to individual friendships, like with one specific person, there can be seasons to that. But there can also be seasons in terms of how you feel about friendship in general. And I think that's totally okay. I think that that's something that traditionally I have been really hard on myself about, is always feeling like I have to be in this place where I'm very like gung ho, getting out there, making new friends, making new connections, going on friend dates, all of those activities and all of the things. And I think part of that comes from the fact that I've moved around a lot. And so I have had to do the whole starting over from scratch thing in adulthood like many times over. So I'm just off the top of my head, I when I was right out of university, I moved to Bangkok, then I moved to Istanbul, then I moved to Ottawa for grad school, then I moved to Kuala Lumpur for a short stint. Then I came back to Ottawa, then I moved to New York City, and then I moved back to Toronto. And Toronto is actually my hometown, but I still feel like here I've had to do a lot of rebuilding because, yes, I grew up here, but I never lived here as an adult. I didn't go to university here, and I have not lived in this city. When I moved back, I hadn't lived in this city for almost 20 years. Like, yes, I had come home, and yes, I'm still really lucky to have some friends from high school and university and that kind of thing. But I largely did kind of feel coming back to Toronto like not like I was starting from scratch, but kind of. I really have had to do a lot of thinking around like building a community here again. So that has definitely been a challenge in the last couple years since moving back home. But I think going back to my earlier point is like because of all of that moving around and all of that flux, I've always felt a ton of pressure to go to meetups and go to events and go to networking things and make friends with coworkers and colleagues and just do a million different things to try to meet people. And I think generally that's a great thing. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think I've just been in that headspace for so long that it was only when I moved to New York that I finally started to hit a point where I was just like, I'm kind of tired of that pace. And in New York, I think that was really the first time where I made friends and I had really great connections in New York. The pandemic kind of, put a hiccup into that, but I still did have like great friends, great colleagues, people that are still in my life today. Like I still regularly have FaceTimes and chats with like a bunch of my friends in New York. So I considered myself really lucky, but I wasn't doing the thing of like going out to events every week. I just, I had hit my 30s. I was kind of in a different place in my life. And I was also in a very serious relationship, and that was taking a lot of my time. And then we were locked inside for a while. So like it just there were a lot of things about my time in New York where I was just like, I'm just not really feeling it. And since coming back to Toronto, I have felt largely the same. And I think I've had a lot of like judgment for myself around that. And it's only, in these last few months as I've been doing this thinking around there are seasons to this that I've sort of eased up on myself a little bit and been like, Kate, like, it's okay. Maybe just there are some times in your life, some periods of your life where you just need to take your foot off the gas and just take it easy and just be, and I think like we're all so caught up all the time in just like the optimization of everything and like the needing to make things happen and the needing to do things and like I just I just want to just chill for a second. Like yes, I'm open to meeting people, I'm open to making friends, but sometimes I also just think we need to just chill. take a second. Let these things happen organically sometimes, you know? And if that means that this is a period of my life where I just don't have as many close connections, I don't have as many friends, that's okay. You know, and I think that is just the kind of season I'm in right now. I think I just have been feeling in a season since I've been back in Toronto where I'm just kind of more okay being on my own. Um, and again, I was like feeling really judgmental of myself for that, of being like, get out there and do the things and like put yourself out there and try to make connections. And now I'm just like, you know what? This doesn't have to be forever. This isn't going to be your life forever. But it is okay if it is your life for a year or two, or even a few years. Sometimes I think we go through phases in our life where we need more solitude. We need to just focus on ourselves. That's fine. So I don't know if you relate to this at all. I don't know if you've gone through those phases where you're like, I really should put myself out there, and you just can't seem to like muster up the ability to do that. One, I just want to say I think that's totally okay. I think that's allowed. I think, it's okay to give yourself a little bit of grace around that. And, don't judge yourself on top of it all. Like, I just don't think that that is really going to help matters. Now, I do think there is some self analysis you need to do as part of that. Like, are you struggling with, crippling depression? Are you finding it impossible to get out of bed in the morning? Are there other things going on? And that's why you're feeling so separated from the idea of making friends. Then, of course, that's something worth looking at and probably doing something about and getting help and addressing it. But, I've really struggled with that in the last couple of years too, because I've been like, am I depressed? Am I just like dealing with crippling depression? And that's why you don't want to go make friends? I've legitimately had those thoughts. And I think it is valid to like go through that questioning. But I really keep coming back to no. Like, in fact, as someone who is really well acquainted with very bad depression, I've just really had a lot of mental health challenges and struggles in my life, that I think I'm actually in a season of my life where, for the most part, I've been feeling okay. You know, I'm sleeping, I'm eating, I'm getting out of the house multiple times a day to get outside, to get fresh air. I have my dog, and she gives me a lot of happiness. I still do see family like regularly a couple times a week. I'm still excited about like my job most of the time. Like, I still, find myself able to work and be productive. I've still been able to find a lot of joy in my hobbies and, read books, play guitar, draw and sketch. And so some of those like hallmark signs of depression, I haven't really found myself struggling with. And so I'm like, okay, I don't know if that's the problem exactly. I think maybe this is just a time in my life where, especially after leaving New York, and a lot had happened in that period of time, right, in the lead up to my departure, and, a lot happened right when I first moved home. I think I was just exhausted. I was just kind of reeling from a lot of change. And for those of you who have been through it, and I think they've even done studies on this. Some of these things are some of the most like stressful things, life events that we ever go through are like a move, a job loss, a serious breakup, like, and I went through like all of these things, plus a whole bunch of other things that happened in my life, and actually one of which was the dissolution of a really important friendship in my life at that time. So there was so much going on. And I think when I got back to Toronto, I was just like, I'm exhausted. I just want to find a job. I just want to be gainfully employed again. I just want to find my own apartment because I was living with my dad at the time. I just want to start saving some money again. I just want to get back on my feet, you know? And that alone probably took a good 6 months to a year for me to just feel like, oh my gosh, I'm a person again. Like, I'm just a person with a job and my own space and the ability to take care of myself again. That took a long time. Like, that takes a long time if you're dealing with something like unemployment, if you're dealing with divorce or a breakup. Like, I think you can probably relate to the fact that these things you don't just like get over, after like a month of being employed again, or, after a month of, being single again. Like these things take a lot of time to recover from. And so I think I was just in that space for quite some time when I first got back to Toronto. And that was like part of why I wasn't really feeling the urge to make friends and wanting to put my energy into a friendship, to be perfectly honest. I just wanted to pour most of my energy into myself. I wanted to go to therapy. I wanted to spend time doing my hobbies. I wanted to spend time, like, as cliche and corny as it sounds, like finding myself again, because I had felt like I'd lost myself in that relationship. And so I just wanted to like get back in touch with my hobbies. What did I like to do? How did I want to spend my time? And let's be honest, because I feel like nobody really talks about this enough, but making friends and even maintaining the friendships that you currently have, it takes work. It takes work and energy and time. And, at different points in your life, you're going to have different amounts of energy and time that you are able and willing to give to friendship. And that's okay. And like, I was just in a place where I was like, I don't have a lot to give right now. Like, the thought of going to meetups and like going out on like a Tuesday night to like a networking event, and, going on Bumble BFF and like messaging people and matching with people and like all, planning friend dates. I was just like, that's a lot. And for those who haven't really had to go through that process before of like making friends from scratch, it's really time consuming, and there's like a lot of disappointment. It feels a lot like dating in some ways, where you're matching with people, you get excited, you're like, "Oh, we seem like we're gonna click," and then it just like doesn't go anywhere. You get ghosted, or it just doesn't turn into anything like actually meeting up in person, or you meet up in person and you're like, "Yeah, that was fine." That it's a lot of that, and so making friends is really time consuming. Like it actually does take a lot of consistent energy, and it often takes like going to the same places over and over again and meeting people there. So I wish that was something that people were just like a bit more honest about too, is that like making friends takes work. It takes a bunch of work and time. We don't always have that work and time, especially living under capitalism. Like, I feel like, especially in these last few years with the cost of living crisis, like, everyone just feels so much more at the end of their rope. Like, everyone just seems so much more tired, run down, exhausted. And I think that is valid. I think the conditions under which we're all living are not amenable to like making friendships and making meaningful connections. So in some ways I don't, blame a lot of us. Um, I think accepting like that is the reality we're all living under is, kind of like an important piece of it too. That being said, I do think there has to be a balance, right? Like it's sort of like that self-analysis I was talking about earlier, where like you have to look in the mirror a bit and be like, am I just depressed, or like what's going on here? And I think it's the same thing with thinking about why you're not putting an effort in, or maybe like, are you too tired to put in an effort? Like, is that because of like your living conditions, your working conditions, what's going on there? And I think it is important and okay to challenge yourself on that as well. I've definitely had those moments of being like, are you just getting a little too comfortable inside? Are you just getting a little too comfortable, like never leaving your house? And for sure, like that's a piece of it too. Absolutely. So I think like you do have to be willing to call that out in yourself a bit, while also giving yourself grace and being like, it's okay for there to be seasons of life. It's okay for you to take 3 months or 6 months if you just need to be a bit more inward. Like, I think that is all right, especially because making friendships and connections does take a lot of time and work and energy that we might not necessarily always have. Now, that's not a free pass to like never put in an effort again. It's not a free pass to like not put an effort in with your existing friends. And I think actually that's like one of my biggest pet peeves now. Thinking about friendship is that I feel like people are allergic to effort now. Like we're allergic to feeling uncomfortable. We're allergic to being inconvenienced. We're like, we just want no part of it. We don't want to be inconvenienced. We don't want to do things that we don't like have to do. Um, I don't know. It's been a really interesting dynamic, and I've witnessed it, in myself. I've witnessed it in my own friendships where people just feel less and less willing and able to like go out of their way to make connections, to sustain connections, to really like make meaningful effort with their current friends, even. And I think that that is really sad. And part of it, I've wondered, I'm like, is this just like friendship in your 30s? Because I think there's a lot of valid reasons why my friendships have changed in my 30s. You know, I've watched many of my friends become parents, and that's like amazing. And I've loved it, and it's been a really fun season of life. But also, of course, like I'd be lying if I said that, most of my friends getting married and having children hasn't completely impacted our friendship. Like, of course it has. And it would be silly to say otherwise. It's just we're all so much more limited in our time, including me, who is single and child free. Like, it's just our responsibilities as we've gotten older have accrued and accrued. And I think that's like tenfold for my friends who have gotten married and have children. There's just so much more on their plate. So I understand it, and there aren't even necessarily hard feelings about it. It's just, again, this is like a season of life. This is a season of life where people are stretched pretty thin between working a 9 to 5 and raising little humans and like keeping a household running. I just genuinely don't know how a lot of people are even functioning. And I think the answer is like they're not really, like they're struggling. A lot of people are struggling. So I have a lot of grace for like my friends who are parents, but it has, of course, changed the dynamic. It has, of course, changed how often I see people, and I think has really like prompted me to realize as well that I just need to be like building new community as well and making friends with like other people who are child free and just like building up my community in other places because of that. And there's no hard feelings in that at all. Like, I love my friends with children and I will continue to be friends with them and I want them in my life. Okay, I'm so sorry. I just had to shut the door. I think my neighbor is vacuuming in the hallway. I don't know. Um Anyway, where was I? I think I was talking about just how, yeah, like these different friendships can have seasons. And like that's also, I think, a tough pill to swallow and has been like one of my biggest learnings with just friendship in adulthood and how much it changes. And like I've had some pretty important friendships just end completely as well. And that's pretty devastating. But I also think like that is okay too. There are some friendships where there's just like going to be a season of your life where that relationship is super important to you, and then it just may not be worth continuing, for the long haul. And that is really heartbreaking. Like, people do not talk about friendship breakups enough. But wow, I've had one in particular that was a doozy. And yeah, I don't know, like I've looking back on it now, I just try to look at it as that friendship was important for like this particular season of my life, and it ended, and I think it ended for like a lot of good reasons. So I also do feel like I had maybe not closure, because I don't know that we ever like actually necessarily like our last conversation was really wild. Like it was, we never like then had like another additional conversation really. No, we just kind of like sent, I think, a couple texts and then just like parted ways and never spoke again. Anyway, sorry, I'm rambling now. Yeah, I think it's hard to know sometimes, is this a friendship that just should end and isn't like worth keeping at all anymore, versus, maybe there's just a season where we're like a lot closer, and then maybe there's a season where we're like not as close, and like that's okay too. I think that can be hard to distinguish and can also be painful to like figure out. I know that even with my friends with kids, like I have had some grieving around that, of being like, of like missing those friendships and like wishing things hadn't changed, while also very much understanding why they've changed. But yeah, I think that can be a really hard question to answer, is like, is this a friendship that you sort of like transition into just like sort of like a more chill acquaintance friendship for a while? Is this like a friendship you end entirely. And there's nothing I can really say that's going to help you make that decision. I think with that really long term friendship that ended for me, and that was my best friend. That was someone we had been best friends for probably 6 or 7 years. We talked every day, we talked constantly. We had traveled around the world together. We took trips to see each other multiple times a year because we lived in different places. This was one of the most important people to me on the planet. Um, and honestly, when the friendship ended, it's interesting because I thought I would have a lot more like mixed feelings about it, or like feeling that urge to reach out, almost like after a breakup. And I really didn't. And I think that was because for probably the last year of our friendship, I sort of knew the direction that it was going. Like it obviously didn't all just end in that one argument. It had been leading up to that argument for about a year. And I had just been feeling not as good in the friendship for like a lot of different reasons. I think she was feeling the same, totally like valid. And so I think it was just evolving to that point. And then when it reached a point where, it kind of came to a head, it was just like, okay, I think it's time for this to be done. And I just knew in my gut, like, I don't know how else to explain it. I just knew in my gut that it was like not a friendship worth salvaging, or like worth trying to reach out a year later to like try to rekindle anything, which is crazy considering how important this person was to me. Like, I am still a bit taken aback by it, but I just think at a certain point, like, you just know in your gut whether this is a person that like you should have in your life or not. And that has gotten easier as I've gotten older to come to terms with that. And I think even in this like more recent situation where this friendship, I don't know what's happened. I don't know if I can say right now if this friendship has ended, but this was with someone who was I met a decade ago, and we just met randomly at like a house party overseas when I was living in Turkey. And we met, and like we kind of just like hit it off, like we got along super well. And so we hung out a bunch that summer, and I think like he was maybe interested in me, and I wasn't exactly reciprocating at the time for a bunch of different reasons. But anyway, it just like didn't work out. It never turned into ugh, it never turned into oh my god. Ugh, it never turned into anything. But we still hung out, a few times that summer, and stayed in touch. I think even after I had come back to Canada, we FaceTimed a couple times, like and we're talking here and there. And then just like as time went by, it sort of fizzled and we weren't really staying in touch. And that has largely been the case for the last, I don't know, 8 or 9 years, which is wild to say. And all of a sudden, we started talking again, I think like last maybe fall, or like heading into the winter. Maybe it was around like November. And that really evolved very naturally into just kind of like talking every day again. And before I knew it, this friend I had made at a random house party a decade ago was now suddenly one of the people I was texting the most in any given day. And um honestly, it was so nice. Like, I think that's like such a beautiful thing about friendship and life. Like, it's just like weird how things like that happen. And I felt like we had always had such a good connection, like we had always just vibed. But yeah, no, it got to a point where I was like genuinely so excited to chat with him every day and hear from him, and like all of the mundane stuff, blah blah blah. What did you have for lunch today? It's like stuff like that. Like all of those like mundane little things, which again, I think are like some of the best things about friendship and relationships. It's just like having someone to share these little things, because that's like 95% of life. 95% of life is, oh, I had to take my car into the shop. And like, it's not like vacations and big adventures. It's just the mundane. Yeah, I'm just finishing up at the grocery store and I'm on my way home. It's that, and having people, whether that's like platonic friends or, romantic relationships, to share that with, I don't know, I think is really quite lovely. And so we were really, fostering this friendship again. And it was like making me really happy. I think a couple things started to happen. And I think this has been maybe just a thing hanging over our friendship always, is that as much as we've gotten along as friends, there's always sort of been that like, is there more? I guess there's something else going on here. I'm not so sure. And like, I feel like sometimes, he was feeling it more and then I was like pulled back. And then, if I'm feeling it more, then he's like pulling back and withdrawing. And so um, it's just like one of those sorts of dynamics. And I think maybe that's affected that in these last few months because, recently I brought up with him, hey, like, I'm just not feeling like super happy in this in this like friendship right now, and I, like it just feels a little hot and cold. Like sometimes it feels very flirty, sometimes it feels very like arm's length, and like um you're not feeling that, and so it's just like a bit confusing. And I just wanted to be honest about how I was feeling. I didn't actually know what direction that would take us, or like if we would just abruptly stop talking. And I didn't want it to be a thing where I was like blaming him either. I wanted it to just be like, hey, like this is how I'm feeling. It's just like this is how it's coming off to me. Um, it's just feeling like a bit hot and cold, and like a bit not like unstable, but just a bit like inconsistent maybe. And I think the way like the conversation ended was just like not great. This is someone who I did like romantically, I was interested in. But if it had stayed platonic and was always just platonic, I would have been thrilled for that too. So if it had been the kind of thing where he was just like, hey, like, I just don't feel the same, I would have been like, ouch, no problem though. Like, that little like shot to the ego. And then, but that has always been our relationship, is one of friendship. And I think even when we first met and I was kind of like the one that was like, I don't think we can really date. He was super cool with that. Like he was great. And we hung out as buddies, and like it was so lovely. And so like if that had been what had happened, I would have been totally okay with it. And sorry, this very long story does have a point in the overall picture of like friendship and what it means to me. But I think as we were talking, the thing that was striking me was it wasn't even just, like inconsistency in like the romantic aspect of the conversation, although that was like present as well. Like sometimes it felt like we were talking as friends, sometimes it felt like we were talking as more. It was also that even when we were talking as friends, I just didn't feel like the level of interest and reciprocity that I want in a friendship, or at least not in a friendship where I am talking to them every day, where I'm spending hours of my day texting you, and like we know about each other's day to day lives. And like friendships can also be intimate, and like talking every day is a form of intimacy. It is. Like, period. Like, if you know a lot of details about someone's life and you're in touch a lot, like, that's intimacy. And in that case, where if I'm putting that, kind of investment into a friendship, I want more out of that friendship. I think your expectations of the level of like support that you're looking for from that person do go up. And I think that's very normal. And like I think that's what I was asking for, was just like, I just want you to be interested in my life, even if it's just as a friend. Um and I think I'm at a point now, like going back to, getting older and just being able to identify a lot more clearly, like what I want in friendship, and being able to communicate it a lot more clearly to another person and say, like, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Cause I also don't expect people to read my mind. Like, I do know that it is on me to like communicate that. And if he had wanted to talk about it more, like I would have been happy to elaborate and have like a proper conversation about it. It didn't seem like that was something he was interested in doing. So we just haven't really talked since, which is kind of a shame. But also, again, at this point in my life, I think I just have to be like okay with letting it go. With the question of like which relationships or which friendships do you like hold on to? Which ones do you demote from being like really good friends to being a bit more just casual friends or to like acquaintances? Which friends friendships do you end entirely? I think a lot of it does depend on how you feel, but a lot of it also has to come from the other person. I think for all of my relationships now, romantic relationships, friendships, whatever, I want people who are obsessed with me. Like, is that too much to ask? And not like codependent obsession, but just like, a healthy dose of obsession. I want my friends to like genuinely adore me and like love spending time with me. I want them to be genuinely interested in my life. I really want to invest my time and energy and friendship into people who like feel the same, who are genuinely like interested in me and what I'm up to. And I don't think that that is too much to ask. So I don't know. I think that's also why friendship can feel harder as you get older because you're also just getting more attuned to what you need. Um, you're not willing to settle for perhaps like more unsatisfying friendships. Like I know I'm not. And as much as it kind of breaks my little heart in a way that I don't know if I'll ever talk to this friend of mine again. At the same time, I also like can't beg someone to like me or beg someone to be interested in me. So I don't know. I think that's also just a big reason why friendship changes as you get older. Like your own standards and expectations really change and evolve. And I think that's okay. I think that's great. Like I think that's a great thing. It really does just mean that for the friendships that I do have and nurture, um that they are that much, more satisfying and meaningful to me. And if it's anything less then I don't want it. I don't want to entertain like just mediocre connections anymore. And so that just means that I think it's probably going to be having fewer friends, but also going back to like the main point of this and kind of how I started this video is that I think it's also just okay to have seasons of life where you have fewer friends, maybe where you have no friends. I've been there before. To have seasons of your life where you have a ton of friends, to have seasons of life where you are wanting and able to put a ton of energy into your friendships, and other times where you're not. And I just think be kind to yourself. Friendship is tough. It changes a lot as you get older, and your own requirements for it are going to change. So just give yourself a lot of love, and please let me know down in the comments if you have experienced any of what I'm talking about. I know that I've been rambling a lot, but again, I wanted to keep this super organic. Also, let me know if this sparked anything for you, if there's anything you have questions about or you would like me to do a follow-up video on, then definitely let me know that in the comments as well. And I will see you on the next one. Bye.